Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Naruto returned to Konoha seeking revenge. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air in the Valley of the End was heavy with the ghosts of titans. Water cascaded down the stoic, carved faces of Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, churning the river below into a frothing, angry gray. It was a fitting backdrop for the end of a battle between brothers, not of blood, but of bond. Naruto Uzumaki's legs burned with an agony that transcended mere exhaustion. Every muscle fiber shrieked in protest, but his arms did not waver. Slung over his shoulder was the dead weight of Sasuke Uchiha, unconscious, but breathing. Alive. He had won. He had kept his promise. That single, desperate thought was the only fuel he had left. It propelled him up the final embankment, and onto the path leading back towards Konohagakure. The journey was a blur of pain and grim determination. The Kyuubi's chakra that had sutured his own grievous wounds, the Chidori-inflicted hole in his chest a chilling testament to how close he'd come to failure, had receded, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness, and a phantom ache that throbbed in time with his frantic pulse. Sasuke's weight was a crushing burden, both a trophy of his victory and a constant, physical reminder of the cost. He could feel the erratic, shallow breaths against his back. He had to get him to Bachan. He had to get everyone help. Niji, Choji, Kiba, Shikamaru. Were they all right? He had left them behind, trusting in his own monstrous power to finish a mission that had nearly claimed them all. As the great gates of Konoha finally loomed into view, a wave of relief so profound it nearly buckled his knees washed over him. The two Chunin guards, Izumo and Kotetsu, were sitting at their posts, looking bored. Their heads snapped up as he stumbled out of the tree-ling. "Naruto!" Izumo exclaimed, jumping to his feet. His eyes widened, first at Naruto's battered state, the torn orange jacket, the dried blood, the sheer exhaustion etched onto his face, and then at the figure he was carrying. "Is that Uchiha Sasuke?" Kotetsu was already speaking into his radio, his voice sharp and urgent. "Hokage-sama, this is Gate Post 4. Naruto Uzumaki has returned. He has Sasuke Uchiha with him. Both require immediate medical attention. I repeat, the Uchiha has been secured." The word secured hung in the air, cold and sterile. It wasn't the word Naruto had expected. He had thought rescued or brought home. He gently lowered Sasuke to the ground as the first medical nin arrived, their feet pounding on the dirt path. They swarmed Sasuke, their hands glowing with green chakra, their voices a flurry of professional, detached commands. "Severe chakra exhaustion, multiple fractures, contusions, traces of a foreign, malevolent chakra, a cursed seal. Get him on a stretcher, now! Priority 1 to the ICU." They treated Sasuke with a frantic urgency, a reverence reserved for a precious, broken treasure. Naruto stood to the side, swaying on his feet, forgotten for a moment. He had expected something, a clap on the back. Well done. Instead, the medics gave him wary, sideways glances. Their eyes lingered on his tattered clothes and the wild, desperate look in his eyes. He could feel their unspoken thoughts like a physical touch. What did he do to the Uchiha? Shizen arrived moments later, her expression a mask of strained professionalism. She did a quick diagnostic scan on Naruto. "Naruto, you're stable for now. The Kyuubi's chakra did most of the work, but your own reserves are dangerously low." Her eyes flickered towards the stretcher now carrying Sasuke away at a run. "What happened out there?" I stopped him," Naruto rasped, his throat raw. "He didn't want to come back. I had to fight him." Shizen's jaw tightened. "Tsunade-sama is waiting for a full report. For now, you need to be checked into the hospital as well. You're under observation." Another cold word. Observation. Not care. He was being managed, not mended. He allowed himself to be led, a dull confusion beginning to cloud his relief. This wasn't the hero's welcome he had naively pictured. This was the quiet, suspicious processing of a dangerous weapon that had just been discharged. The Konoha hospital was a hive of controlled chaos. The waiting room of the shinobi wing was thick with a tense, suffocating silence. Here, the true cost of the mission was laid bare. Chozo Akimichi stood like a mountain, his face a grim landscape of worry for his son. Suminizuka paced like a caged wolf, her Niken Kuramura whining softly at her feet. The Hyuga elders were present, their pale, vein-lined eyes radiating a cold displeasure, their presence a silent, heavy judgment on behalf of Niji. And then there was Shikaku Nara, leaning against the wall, his eyes closed. He was the only one who nodded at Naruto as he was escorted in. It was a small gesture, but in the hostile atmosphere, it felt like a lifeline. Naruto was placed on a cot in a corner of the bustling room, a privacy screen half-heartedly pulled around him. He could hear everything. Choji's heart stopped twice on the operating table. A hushed voice said, "They said Niji might never fully recover the use of his shoulder. Akamaru is in surgery too. Kiba refuses to leave his side." Each report was a fresh stab of guilt. He had pushed them. He had asked them to risk their lives for his promise. And they had paid the price. The whispers grew, and soon they found a new focus. "And what about the Uchiha? I heard he's in a worse state than any of them. It was the demon brat that did it, wasn't it? Used that disgusting red chakra." "Of course it was. He's a monster. Always has been. He nearly killed the last loyal Uchiha to drag him back like a prisoner." Naruto's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. Loyal Uchiha? Sasuke had betrayed the village. He had tried to kill him. He had left to seek power from Orochimaru, one of Konoha's most reviled enemies. How could they twist it like this? He saw a group of civilian council members sweep into the hospital, their faces etched with faux concern that quickly morphed into outrage as they spoke to a jonin near the reception desk. "This is an outrage," one portly merchant hissed, his voice carrying easily. "The Uchiha is a village asset. A symbol. To have him brutalized by the Jinchuriki, it's unacceptable." "The Hokage must answer for this," the jonin nodded grimly. "Many feel the same. The boy is unstable." Naruto felt the walls of the room closing in. The air grew thin. The will of fire he had so desperately tried to embody, the belief that the village was a family that protected its own, felt like a childish fantasy. Here, in the sterile quiet of the hospital, he wasn't a hero who had completed an S-rank mission. He was a liability who had damaged more valuable property. Tsunade finally emerged from the ICU, her face pale and drawn. Her knuckles were white where she gripped a clipboard. She surveyed the room, her gaze sweeping over the worried families and the whispering shinobi. Her eyes, when they finally landed on Naruto, were unreadable. "Choji, Niji, and Kiba are stabilized," she announced, her voice carrying a weary authority. "They are heroes who risked everything for their comrade and their village." A murmur of relief went through the room. "Sasuke Uchiha is in critical condition, but his life is no longer in immediate danger." She walked over to Naruto's cot, pulling the screen closed behind her, granting them a sliver of privacy. "Ba-chan!" Naruto started, his voice cracking. "I brought him back." "You did?" Tsunade said, her voice low and grave. "You also broke 7 of his ribs, caused severe internal hemorrhaging, and pushed his curse seal into a state of flux that nearly consumed him." The medic said the chakra burns on his body were consistent with the Kyuubi's. Naruto flinched. "I had to. He used the curse seal's full power. He would have killed me, Ba-chan." "He left." "I know," Tsunade said, pinching the bridge of her nose. "I know, Naruto. But knowing and convincing the council are 2 very different things." She sighed, a sound so heavy it seemed to carry the weight of the entire village. "Danzo is already using this. The elders are calling your actions reckless and uncontrolled. They're framing this not as a successful retrieval, but as an unstable Jinchuriki running rampant, and nearly killing a clan heir." The blood drained from Naruto's face. "But that's not what happened. Shikamaru was there." "He knows. Shikamaru's report will be heard, but it will be weighed against the evidence. 4 gravely injured Chunin and a near-dead Uchiha. And you, with barely a scratch on you thanks to the fox." She placed a hand on his shoulder, and he was shocked to feel it tremble slightly. "Listen to me, Naruto. This is political now. I need you to stay quiet. I've had you confined to your apartment under A&B watch. For your own protection, you understand?" Naruto stared at her, his mind reeling. For my protection. The words sounded like a lie. It felt like a cage. He was being hidden away, silenced. I kept my promise, he whispered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. I kept my promise to Sakura-chan. Tsunade's expression softened with a flicker of pity. I know you did, brat. Now let me handle the fallout. She left, and the screen was pulled away. The glares he received now were colder, more certain. The verdict had been passed. He was the villain of his own story. The apartment was colder and smaller than he remembered. An ANBU operative, clad in gray armor and a blank porcelain mask, stood motionless on the rooftop across from his window. Another was posted by his door. They were his guards, his protectors, his jailers. For 2 days, he sat in a deafening silence, broken only by the muffled sounds of the village below. He tried to eat the instant ramen left for him, but it tasted like cardboard. He stared at the teen photo on his nightstand, a smiling, younger him, a brooding Sasuke, a bright-eyed Sakura, and a lazy-eyed Kakashi. A relic from a time when things were simple, a time when he believed their bonds were unbreakable. He replayed the fight in the valley over and over in his head. Sasuke's cold eyes, the chilling pronouncement of his intent to sever their bond. The screech of the Chidori against his Rasengan. The desperation, the pain, the rage. He had done what was necessary. Any shinobi would have. Wouldn't they? The whispers started to drift up from the street. He found himself creeping to the window, hiding behind the curtain, listening. Heard the Uchiha boy might have permanent chakra network damage, all because of him. The Hokage should have gotten rid of that monster years ago. My son was on the retrieval team. He said Naruto was like a wild animal. Each word was a stone cast at the fragile stained glass of his hope. It cracked, splintered, and threatened to shatter completely. He wasn't Naruto Uzumaki, genin of the leaf. He was the Jinchuriki, the demon brat. The scapegoat. He waited for his friends. Surely, they would come. Shikamaru would explain how dire the situation was. Choji would offer him some chips. Even Kiba would probably come to yell at him. And that would be better than this crushing loneliness. But no one came. The hours bled into a miserable, isolating eternity. On the evening of the second day, there was a sharp rap on his door. Hope, foolish and stubborn, flared in his chest. The ANBU guard at the door spoke in a monotone. Sakura Haruno is here to see you. The door opened, and she stepped inside. The sight of her stole his breath. Her pink hair was disheveled, and her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, shadowed by dark circles of sleeplessness. She wasn't wearing her usual cheerful attire, but a simple, dark dress. She looked broken. Sakura-chan, he breathed, a genuine, relieved smile finally gracing his lips. He took a step towards her. Are you okay? I was so worried. Her hand shot out, not to hug him, but to slap him. The crack echoed in the small room. Naruto's head snapped to the side, a stinging, red handprint blooming on his cheek. He stared at her, his smile dissolving into stunned disbelief. Don't you dare ask if I'm okay, she hissed, her voice trembling with a rage that was terrifying in its intensity. Tears streamed freely down her face, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, unadulterated fury. I sat by Sasuke-kun's bedside for 2 days, Naruto. 2 days. I watched the life almost fade from his eyes because of what you did to him. The medics, they said they'd never seen such brutal injuries on a comrade. Comrade? Naruto's voice was barely a whisper. Sakura-chan, he left the village. He was going to Orochimaru. He tried to kill me. He was confused. She shrieked, taking a step forward and shoving him hard in the chest. He stumbled back, too shocked to resist. He was hurting, and you just had to be the hero, didn't you? You couldn't just talk to him. You had to beat him, to break him, to drag him back like an animal. I made you a promise, he said, his own voice rising in desperate self-defense. A promise for a lifetime. I said I would bring him back. I didn't want him back like this. She screamed, her composure completely shattering. She began to beat her fists against his chest, her blows lacking her usual chakra-enhanced strength, fueled only by grief and anger. I didn't want him broken. I didn't want him lying in a hospital bed, barely breathing. You don't understand anything, Naruto. You're a monster. You have a monster inside you, and you let it out, and you almost killed him. The word hung between them, heavier than any jutsu. Monster, I hate you, she sobbed, her strength finally giving out as she collapsed against him, her tears soaking the front of his shirt. I hate you, Naruto. He stood there, frozen, his arms limp at his sides. He didn't wrap them around her. He didn't offer comfort. The warmth of her body felt like a brand. The promise he had risked his life for, the bond he thought was the most important thing in the world, had just been thrown back in his face, drenched in hatred. He looked over her head at the impassive mask of the ANBU guard in the doorway, who had watched the entire exchange without moving a muscle. The guard reached in, gently but firmly pulled the sobbing Sakura away from him, and escorted her out. The door clicked shut, sealing Naruto in the suffocating silence once more. He slowly raised a hand to his cheek. It still stung, but the pain was nothing compared to the gaping, icy void that had just opened up in his chest, right where his heart was supposed to be. The next visitor came the following afternoon. The knock was softer, more hesitant. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto didn't get up from the floor. He just stared at the wall, his back against the couch. Kakashi let himself in, his visible eye curved in its usual lazy arc, but it didn't reach the rest of his face. The air around his sensei was thick with a conflict that was almost palpable. Yo, Naruto, Kakashi said, his attempt at nonchalance falling completely flat. He looked around the dim, depressing apartment. Cozy. Naruto didn't respond. He just continued to stare at the water-stained spot on the wall. Kakashi sighed, the sound heavy, and slid down to sit on the floor a few feet away from him. I read the mission reports. All of them. Shikamaru's, the medic's, yours. Silence. It was a difficult situation. Kakashi continued, choosing his words with painstaking care. You were given an objective, and you completed it under extreme duress. You did what you were ordered to do. The clinical, detached words were worse than Sakura's emotional outburst. Kakashi was speaking to him like a superior officer debriefing a subordinate, not like a sensei speaking to his student. Why am I here, sensei? Naruto finally asked, his voice flat and devoid of its usual energy. Tsunade-sama wanted you to know that the council is agitated, Kakashi said, avoiding his student's gaze. They're pushing for a formal tribunal to assess your fitness as a Konoha shinobi. My fitness? A harsh, grating sound escaped Naruto's lips. It might have been a laugh. I brought back their precious Uchiha. I thought that's what they wanted. They wanted the Uchiha, Naruto. They didn't care about your promise to Sakura, Kakashi said, his voice dropping. They care about the Sharingan, about the last of a powerful clan. They see him as an asset, and right now, they see you as the one who damaged that asset. Finally, the unvarnished truth. It wasn't even a comfort. It was just confirmation of the cold reality he was beginning to accept. So what happens now? Naruto asked. Do you all just let them do it? Let them call me a monster? A traitor? He finally turned to look at Kakashi, his blue eyes hard and unforgiving. Where were you, sensei, when they were turning the whole village against me? When Sakura-chan was here screaming at me? Kakashi flinched. The question hit its mark. He looked down at his gloved hands. Things are complicated, Naruto. I am a jonin of this village. I have a duty to maintain order. Tsunade is fighting for you, but her position is precarious. Danzo is making a power play. So you do nothing? Naruto pressed, his voice dangerously low. You just stand by and talk about how complicated things are while they get ready to throw me to the wolves? You, who taught us about how those who abandon their friends are worse than trash. The accusation hung in the air, sharp and glittering as a kunai's edge. Kakashi's visible eye closed. He looked impossibly weary, haunted by ghosts Naruto couldn't see. I failed you all once before with Sasuke. He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. He couldn't admit that he was failing again, this time through inaction. He was choosing the system, the village, the path of least resistance, over the boy who looked at him with a mirror of his own father's eyes. You followed your orders on the mission, Naruto, Kakashi said, his voice regaining a detached, professional edge. It was a retreat, a defense mechanism. Now you have to follow these. Stay put, don't cause trouble. Let Tsunade handle it. He stood up, his duty reasserting itself over his guilt. I'll make sure your food supplies are restocked. He left without another word. Naruto watched him go, the last vestiges of his faith in his teacher crumbling to dust. Kakashi wasn't going to save him. He was just another cog in the machine that was grinding him down. He had chosen his side. And it wasn't Naruto's. He was truly, utterly alone. The realization didn't bring sadness anymore. The space that had been hollowed out by Sakura's hatred and Kakashi's apathy began to fill with something else. Something cold, hard, and sharp. Rage. A quiet, simmering rage that burned away the tears and the confusion. They had used him. They had praised him when he was a useful tool, a cheerful idiot running headfirst into danger. But the moment he became inconvenient, the moment his power became scary instead of useful, they cast him aside. They caged him, maligned him, and left him to rot. He was their scapegoat. Their Jinchuriki. Their demon. Fine. Night fell on the third day. The village was alive with activity, the sounds of life and laughter a mocking chorus outside his prison window. Naruto sat in the dark, not moving, just listening. He had stopped hoping for visitors. He had stopped hoping for anything. He was just waiting. He didn't know for what, but he felt it in his bones, a sense of impending finality. It came just after midnight, a crash from outside. A choke scream, cut off abruptly. Naruto was on his feet in an instant, his lethargy burned away by a sudden surge of adrenaline. He crept to the window, peering through the grimy glass. On the rooftop across the street, where his ANBU guard had been standing watch, there was only darkness. Then he looked down, into the alley below his apartment. The ANBU guard lay there, twisted at an unnatural angle. His porcelain mask was shattered, revealing a young, unfamiliar face frozen in a rictus of terror. His chest was torn open, a brutal, gaping wound that looked as if it had been carved out by massive claws, and from the wound, a faint, almost invisible wisp of crimson energy drifted into the night air. Red chakra. The Kyuubi's chakra. Naruto's blood ran cold. He knew that chakra better than his own. He knew its feel, its scent, its malevolent hum. He also knew, with absolute certainty, that he had been in this room the entire time. His eyes darted around frantically. The NBU at his door hadn't made a sound. The street was suddenly silent. Too silent. It was a setup. The confinement. The whispers. The isolation. This was the final piece. The checkmate. They weren't trying to assess his fitness. They were manufacturing a reason for his execution. Footsteps pounded on the stairs outside his door, heavy and numerous. He could feel their chakras, cold, disciplined, and utterly devoid of emotion. Not regular shinobi. Root. The door to his apartment was kicked off its hinges, slamming into the far wall. Standing in the splintered frame was not Tsunade, not Kakashi, but Danzo Shimura. His face was a mask of cold fury, his one visible eye glittering with triumphant malice. Flanking him were a dozen Root ANBU, their animal masks seeming to sneer at him in the darkness. The Jinchuriki has lost control, Danzo announced, his voice ringing with chilling, false authority. He pointed a bandaged hand at Naruto. It has murdered its guard. The threat is active. Subdue it. Use any force necessary. The Root agents flowed into the room, kunai drawn. In that instant, Naruto's world narrowed to a single, burning point of clarity. There would be no trial. No defense. No one was coming to help him. This was his death sentence, being carried out right here in the squalor of his own apartment. They had pushed him, prodded him, and now they had cornered him, expecting him to break. Something inside him did break. But it wasn't his spirit. It was the dam holding back his rage. He wouldn't let them. He wouldn't die like a dog in a cage for a crime he didn't commit. You lie. Naruto snarled, the sound ripping from his throat, more animal than human. For the first time in 3 days, he willingly reached for the power coiling in his gut. He didn't ask for it. He took it. A volcanic eruption of crimson chakra exploded from him, shattering the windows and blasting the first wave of Root agents back into the hallway. The pressure in the room became immense, the air crackling with raw, untamed power. His eyes bled from blue to a searing, slitted red. His canines elongated, and his whiskers thickened into dark, feral marks on his cheeks. A single, shimmering tail of pure chakra lashed out behind him, carving a gouge in the floor. He wasn't losing control. For the first time, he was in perfect, horrifying sync with the hatred that dwelled within him. It was a shared fury, a shared desire for survival. Danzo took an involuntary step back, a flicker of genuine shock on his face before it was replaced by grim satisfaction. This was what he wanted. A public display of the monster. See? The demon reveals its true face, he commanded. Do not let it escape the village! Naruto didn't wait. He shot through the shattered window, landing on the street below in a crouch that cracked the pavement. Shinobi were converging from all directions now, Jonin and Chunin who had heard the commotion, their faces a mixture of fear and determination. Stop! Uzumaki, stand down! A Jonin yelled, his hands flying through seals. Naruto didn't even look at him. He was a blur of motion. He wasn't fighting to kill, that would take too long. He was fighting to escape. He moved with a brutal, instinctual grace he didn't know he possessed. A Chunin who lunged at him was met with a backhand that sent him flying, his arm broken in 3 places. Another who tried to trap him in a shadow jutsu found the shadows themselves recoiling from the sheer toxicity of the Kyuubi's chakra. He saw familiar faces in the crowd. Ino. Choji's father. They looked at him with horror. To them, Danzo's words were true. They saw the red chakra, the feral eyes, the violence. They saw the demon. They didn't see the cornered, terrified boy lashing out to survive. He vaulted onto a rooftop, the gates his only goal. But his path was blocked. Mori and Biu, loyal to the Hokage this time, landed in front of him. Naruto, surrender! One commanded. The Hokage will sort this out. Lies, a voice that sounded remarkably like the Kyuubi's whispered in his mind. All lies. He didn't answer with words. He held out his hand, and a sphere of swirling, violet-tinged chakra roared to life, a Rasengan, corrupted by his rage and the fox's power. He slammed it not into the NBU, but into the rooftop beneath their feet. The explosion tore the building apart, sending the elite shinobi scattering. It was enough. The path was clear. He ran, his feet barely seeming to touch the tiles. The wind whipped past his face, carrying the shouts and alarms of the village he once called home. The village he had sworn to protect, to one day lead. The village that had just tried to murder him. He reached the outer wall, leaping to the top in a single, chakra-fueled bound. For a moment he paused, looking back. The lights of Konoha spread out below him, a glittering constellation of warmth and life. From up here, it looked so peaceful. So beautiful. A bitter, profound hatred, colder and deeper than any he had ever known, solidified in his soul. It was a poison, but it was also a promise. He remembered the words he had spoken to Sakura, the promise of a lifetime. That promise was dead, murdered in a hospital waiting room in a cold, lonely apartment. A new vow rose from its ashes, silent and deadly. I'm not running, he thought, his red eyes burning with unshed tears of fury. I'm retreating. He turned his back on the will of fire, on the smiling face on the Hokage monument, on the very idea of home. As he leaped into the darkness of the forest, a rogue ninja by every definition, he made a new promise. Not to Sakura, not to the village, but to himself and the beast that raged within him. He would be back. And when he returned, he would make them all burn. The forest was a green hell, and it had been for weeks. Rain, a constant, miserable drizzle, had soaked Naruto Uzumaki to the bone so many times he'd forgotten the feeling of being dry. It plastered his now filthy orange jacket to his skin, the once vibrant color obscured by a sheath of mud, grime, and dried blood, some of it his, some of it not. He ran. It was all he had done since that night. He ran from the memory of Danzo's triumphant sneer, from the horror in the eyes of people he once considered neighbors, from the crushing weight of Sakura's hatred and Kakashi's hollow duty. Most of all, he ran from the phantoms in black cloaks and animal masks that dogged his every step. Konoha's trackerine were relentless. He scrambled down a slick, moss-covered ravine, his breath coming in ragged, painful bursts. A poorly healed gash on his thigh, a gift from a root agent's Tonto on the night of his escape, screamed in protest. The Kyuubi's chakra, his only lifeline, was a sputtering flame. It could mend the catastrophic, but the constant strain of running, fighting, and starving left it no time to properly heal the mundane. The result was a body perpetually on the verge of collapse, held together by sheer rage and the fox's resentful energy. A twig snapped behind him. He didn't hesitate. He spun, a kunai appearing in his hand as if by magic, and hurled it into the dense foliage. There was a dull thunk as it embedded in a tree trunk, followed by the whisper of movement from 2 other directions. They were flanking him. A standard 3-man cell. Amateurs would have been spooked by the kunai. These were professionals. They're tracking the chakra. A low growl echoed in the back of his mind. It was a voice he had spent his whole life trying to ignore, a hateful rumble from the cage in his gut. Your pathetic rage leaks like a sieve, brat. It's a beacon in the dark. Naruto ignored the voice, diving behind a large, water-slicked boulder as a volley of saban needles peppered the space he had just occupied. He pressed his back against the cold stone, forcing his breathing to quiet. His senses, sharpened by weeks of paranoia, strained against the drumming of the rain. He could feel their chakra signatures, cool, disciplined, patient. They were waiting him out. Patience was a luxury he didn't have. Hunger was a cold, hard knot in his stomach. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, save for a handful of bitter roots that had made him sick. His reserves were almost gone. If he didn't end this now, he wouldn't have the strength to run again. Fine. He closed his eyes, molding the last dregs of his own chakra with a sliver of the fox's. Kaige Bunshin no Jutsu. 3 shadow clones flickered into existence around him. Without a word, they scattered, 2 charging left and right as decoys, the 3rd climbing the rock face above him. As expected, the trackers reacted. 2 blurs of motion engaged his clones. He heard the telltale poof of their dispersal almost immediately. But it was the distraction he needed. The 3rd tracker, the leader, likely, remained hidden, waiting for the real Naruto to reveal himself. Naruto's 3rd clone, perched atop the boulder, formed a Rasengan. It was a sloppy, unstable thing, flickering like a dying lightbulb, but it was bright and loud. The hidden tracker's attention, just for a nanosecond, was drawn upward. That was the only opening Naruto needed. He exploded from behind the boulder, not towards the fight, but in the opposite direction, a desperate gambit to break the encirclement. He was a flash of orange and mud, his legs pumping furiously. He almost made it. A chain shot out from the undergrowth, wrapping around his ankle with brutal precision. He was yanked off his feet, crashing face first into the mud. The impact drove the air from his lungs in a pained gasp. Before he could recover, a figure landed squarely on his back, driving a knee into his spine. He cried out, a sharp, ragged sound of agony. "Target secured," the tracker said, his voice a dispassionate monotone filtered through a standard Konoha mask. "Jinchuriki is weakened. Prepare the suppression seal," Naruto thrashed, bucking wildly, but the man's weight was immense, his knee a point of pure agony pinning him to the forest floor. He could feel another tracker approaching, a sealing scroll already unfurled. The seal. They were going to seal his chakra. They would drag him back to Konoha in chains, a neutered animal to be paraded before Danzo and the council. They would lock him in a cell so deep he'd forget the sun, and leave him to rot. No. No. The simmering rage that had been his constant companion for weeks finally boiled over. It was no longer a quiet fire but a volcanic eruption. The thought of their hands on him, of their victory, of Danzo's smug face, it was a fate worse than any death. "Get off me!" he screamed, the sound raw and inhuman. A tidal wave of crimson chakra exploded from his body. It wasn't the controlled cloak he had summoned before. This was a wild, untamed detonation of pure power. The tracker on his back was blasted away as if hit by a cannonball, crashing through 2 trees before slumping to the ground, motionless. The chain around Naruto's ankle sizzled and melted into slag. The second tracker, the one with the scroll, froze for a half-second in sheer terror. The air itself seemed to vibrate with malevolence. He saw Naruto rise, wreathed in a chaotic shroud of boiling red energy. 2 tails of chakra, dense and seething, lashed out behind him, carving deep furrows in the mud. Naruto's face was a mask of pure fury, his eyes burning red, his teeth sharpened into fangs. The man didn't even have time to scream. A chakra claw, grotesquely elongated, shot forward and slammed into his chest. There was a sickening crunch of bone and armor, and the tracker was thrown back, landing in a heap. The third tracker, the one who had thrown the chain, was already retreating, his professional discipline shattered by the terrifying display. He was fast, a true elite, but he was running from a force of nature. Naruto, moving on all fours like an animal, was faster. He closed the distance in 3 monstrous bounds, a low growl tearing from his throat. He pounced, tackling the man to the ground. He raised a clawed hand, the tips of his fingers glowing with murderous energy, ready to tear the man's throat out. He stared down into the wide, terrified eyes visible above the man's mask, and he saw the Konoha leaf emblem on his forehead protector. For a heartbeat, the rage faltered. This was a Konoha shinobi. Someone who might have eaten at Ichiraku's. Someone who might have a family. Someone he had once sworn to protect. The hesitation cost him. The tracker, seizing the momentary lapse, slammed a flash bomb into the ground between them. An intense burst of light and sound erupted, blindingly white and deafeningly loud. Naruto roared in pain, clutching his face as his hypersensitive senses were overwhelmed. He stumbled back, disoriented, the red chakra flickering erratically. When his vision cleared moments later, the tracker was gone. He could feel the man's chakra signature fleeing, fading rapidly into the distance. He had let him go. The adrenaline vanished, and the immense cost of his outburst came crashing down. The 2 chakra tails dissipated, the red shroud receding into his skin, leaving him shivering and exposed. An all-consuming exhaustion, heavier than anything he had ever felt, dragged him to his knees. His vision swam, black spots dancing at the edges. He had won. He had survived. But as he collapsed face down in the cold mud, the rain washing over his battered body, it felt entirely like a defeat. He was too weak. Too reckless. His rage was a powerful weapon, but it was also a beacon, a liability. He had survived this time through brute force, but the next time, he wouldn't be so lucky. As the world dissolved into a black, spiraling abyss, a final, despairing thought echoed in his empty mind. I can't do this alone. He awoke to the sound of dripping water. A rhythmic, eternal plink, plunk, plink that seemed to echo in the hollows of his very soul. He wasn't in the forest anymore. There was no mud, no rain, only a chilling dampness and the faint, disgusting smell of rust and stagnant water. He pushed himself up. He was standing in ankle-deep, inky black water that swirled around his legs like cold, dead hands. A labyrinth of massive, groaning pipes crisscrossed overhead, disappearing into an oppressive darkness. He knew this place. His own mind. The cage. But something was different. The last time he'd been here consciously, the water had been clear, the pipes merely old. Now the water was black and viscous, clinging to him. The pipes swept a steady stream of rust-colored liquid. The air was heavy, thick with a palpable sense of despair and ancient malice. His entire mindscape felt corrupted. Fouled by his own hatred. He waded forward, the water sloshing around his knees, then his waist. It was a physical effort to move, as if the water itself was trying to drag him down into its lightless depths. Ahead, a familiar, baleful red light pulsed from behind a set of colossal bars. He reached the gate. And there, within the cage, was the source of his power, his curse, and now, his only potential ally. The 9-tailed fox, Kurama, was not the raging, snarling beast of his nightmares. The fox lay on its side, its massive head resting on its paws, 9 enormous tails swaying lazily behind it in the cavernous space. Its crimson eyes, each larger than Naruto's entire body, were open and fixed on him. There was no mindless rage in them. Instead, there was a sharp, ancient, and unnervingly intelligent contempt. A cruel amusement danced in their slitted depths. So, the hero returns to his dungeon. The Kyuubi's voice thundered, not just in Naruto's ears, but through his entire being. It was a psychic earthquake, a rumble of pure power and eons of accumulated bitterness. Or should I say the scapegoat? The monster? The failed little promise keeper? Naruto flinched at the last barb, but he didn't retort with his usual bravado. There was no "Shut up, you stupid fox!" on his lips. The energy for such defiance was long gone, burned away in the forest and drowned in this cold, dark water. He simply stared, his own blue eyes, shadowed and weary, meeting the fox's blazing red. "They tried to kill me," Naruto said, his voice a hoarse whisper that was swallowed by the immense chamber. "They framed me. And they tried to kill me." Kurama let out a low, rumbling chuckle, the sound of grinding mountains. "Of course they did. What else did you expect from humans? They fear what they cannot control. They cage what they fear, and they destroy what they cannot cage." The fox shifted its massive head, its gaze boring into Naruto. "You are surprised. I am not. I have watched your pathetic species for 1,000 years. This is their nature." He stood there, the cold water lapping at his chest, the truth of the fox's words a leaden weight in his stomach. "Tell me, boy," Kurama continued, its tone dripping with sarcasm. "How fares the will of fire? That noble lie they feed to children to convince them to die for old men's ambitions. You burned so brightly with it. You were going to be Hokage. You were going to earn their respect." A massive tail swept forward, its tip pointing accusingly at Naruto. "And look at you now. Hunted by the very village you swore to protect. Hated by the girl whose affection you so desperately craved. Abandoned by the teacher who mouthed empty platitudes about camaraderie. You are nothing to them but a weapon to be polished when useful and discarded when inconvenient. You were never a person to them. You were only ever the Jinchuriki." Each word was a perfectly aimed blow, striking at the cracked foundations of everything Naruto had ever believed. He wanted to scream, to deny it, but he had no defense. The evidence was written in the stinging memory of a slap, the cold detachment in his sensei's eye, and the phantom pain in his spine where a Konoha tracker's knee had pinned him down. As if sensing his crumbling resolve, Kurama pushed deeper. The water around Naruto began to swirl, and the surface shimmered, not with light, but with darkness. Images, stark and vivid, began to play out on its black surface. He saw himself as a small child, no older than 5, standing outside a toy shop, staring at a model shinobi. He saw the shopkeeper's face twist in a snarl as he came out and shooed him away, calling him a demon. He saw the other children being pulled away by their parents, their whispers of "Monster Fox," following him as he walked to the lonely, empty swing. He saw himself sitting there for hours, a solitary figure against the setting sun. "You see this?" Kurama's voice was a low snarl. "This is their true face. It was never hidden. You simply chose not to look. You painted over their hatred with your own desperate, idiotic optimism. You thought if you smiled wide enough, they would forget the monster in your gut. But they never forget." The scene shifted. Now he was seeing through the walls of the Hokage's office. He saw the civilian council members, their faces red with indignation, demanding his punishment. He saw Hamura and Koharu, the village elders, speaking to Tsunade, their voices cold and pragmatic. "The boy is a liability, Tsunade. His emotional instability puts the entire village at risk. He nearly destroyed the Uchiha." Then, the vision zoomed into a darker, more hidden place, a subterranean chamber filled with masked figures. He saw Danzo, his arm wrapped in bandages, giving the order. "The ANBU guard outside his apartment will be eliminated. Use a trace of the Jinchuriki's own chakra on the wound. We will give the village the proof it needs that the demon has broken its leash. When we move in, you are authorized to use lethal force." Naruto's breath hitched. He was watching his own death being planned. The cold, calculated betrayal of it stole the air from his lungs. The final vision was the most painful. It was Sakura, but not the one who had screamed at him. This was Sakura at Sasuke's bedside. Sasuke was awake, his arm in a sling, looking out the window with his usual brooding expression. Sakura was smiling, a genuine, relieved smile. "You're a hero, Sasuke-kun," she was saying. "The whole village is celebrating. They're saying you held off the demon brat, even after he went berserk." Sasuke didn't even look at her. "He's still a loser," he muttered, but there was a flicker of something, pride? Satisfaction, in his eyes. The vision dissolved, leaving Naruto staring at his own reflection in the black water. A gaunt, haunted face with eyes that had seen too much. They made me the villain," he whispered, the words trembling with a dawning, horrific understanding. "They gave him my victory. They gave the pretty, pedigreed Uchiha the glory, and the demon container the blame," Kurama corrected, its voice laced with a grim satisfaction. "It is the way of the world. The strong and beautiful write the history. The ugly and inconvenient are erased. Or, in your case, turned into a cautionary tale." The great fox rose to its feet, its massive form filling the cage, its chakra radiating a heat that pushed back the chill of the water. "You have been running on rage and instinct. A wild animal lashing out. That is why you are weak. That is why you are failing. That raw power I give you? It is a blunt instrument. It is the flailing of a child in a tantrum. It's loud, it's messy, and it leaves you exposed and exhausted. Is that what you want? To burn out in a blaze of useless fury, caught and killed by the next pack of dogs they send after you?" "No," Naruto said, the word a shard of ice. He looked up, and for the first time, his eyes held no fear of the beast before him. They held only a chilling, empty resolve. "What then?" A slow, terrible grin spread across Kurama's vulpine face, revealing rows of dagger-like teeth. "They cast you out. They called you a demon. Very well. Let us show them what a demon can truly do, but not with blind rage. With purpose. With knowledge." The fox's eyes glowed with an intensity that seemed to light the very darkness of the mindscape. "Your human teachers gave you scraps. A flawed clone technique, an unfinished A-rank jutsu. They taught you just enough to be a useful soldier. I can give you mastery. Your father, the fourth Hokage, was a genius. Your mother, a pure-blooded Uzumaki, was a master of the sealing arts that made your clan feared throughout the world. That legacy runs through your veins, boy. It is your birthright. A birthright they hid from you." Kurama took a step closer to the bars, the red energy crackling around it. "I can teach you to harness my power not as a flood, but as a scalpel. I can teach you to truly master the wind release, to sharpen it until it can slice through steel and stone as if they were paper. I can unlock the secrets of Fuinjutsu that lie dormant in your Uzumaki blood, seals that can disrupt barriers, shatter jutsu, and bind even the strongest of foes. I can give you the tactics, the strategies, the psychological warfare that can dismantle a village from the inside out without leveling a single building. I can tell you the truths they buried, about the founding of the villages, about the true nature of the bijou, about the lies that hold their entire world together." The offer hung in the air, seductive and terrifying. It was everything he could ever want. Not just the power to fight back, but the knowledge to understand why. The ability to be not just a force, but a mind, a strategist. A phantom that could pull the strings, expose the rot, and watch the entire corrupt system crumble under the weight of its own hypocrisy. Naruto's heart hammered against his ribs. This was a precipice. A point of no return. To accept was to fully embrace the monster they called him, to become the demon of their fears. He thought of Iruka-sensei, the first person to ever show him kindness. He thought of Tuchi and Ayam from Ichiraku, who always had a warm bowl of ramen and a smile for him. A part of him, the small, lonely boy on the swing, recoiled from the abyss. Their kindness was a drop of rain in a desert of hatred. Kurama snarled, as if reading his mind. Its voice was sharp, cutting away his last hesitation. "Do not let sentiment for the few blind you to the cruelty of the many." Iruka's kindness did not stop the council. The ramen man's smile did not save you from the assassins in your apartment. They are good people trapped in a rotten system. If you truly wish to honor their kindness, you do not forgive the system. You shatter it, shatter it. The words echoed in the empty space where his dreams used to be. The dream of being Hokage was dead. The dream of being a hero was a joke. All that was left was the cold, hard reality of his exile. All he had left was this beast, this shared cage, and this burning, all-consuming need for retribution. He looked up at the colossal fox, his reflection a tiny, insignificant figure in its massive crimson eye. He was no longer looking at a monster. He was looking at his only truth. His only ally. His teacher. What do you want in return? Naruto asked, his voice steady now, unnaturally calm. Kurama's grin widened. I want what you want. Vengeance. I have been a prisoner for a century, first to Madara, then to Hashirama's wife, then to your mother, and now to you. My existence has been one cage after another, a tool for shinobi to wield in their endless, petty wars. My hatred for this world, and for Konoha in particular, dwarfs your own 1,000 times over. The fox's chakra flared, and the bars of the cage glowed white-hot. I cannot be free, not yet. But I can turn my prison into a weapon. Your body is my vessel, boy. Your actions will be my actions. Every pillar of their world you tear down, every lie you expose, every hypocrite you bring to ruin, will be a blow against the bars of this cage. Your vengeance will be my vengeance, your hatred will fuel me, and my knowledge will guide you. We will be two minds with a single purpose, to make them regret the day they ever decided to cage a god and scorn a child. It was a pact. A contract written in shared pain and sealed with mutual hatred. Naruto took a deep breath, the cold, stagnant air filling his lungs. When he exhaled, all the warmth, all the boyish hope, all the desperate need for acceptance, went with it. All that remained was a core of icy, unbreakable purpose. He met Kurama's gaze, his own blue eyes as hard as diamonds. Show me, he said, the words echoing with a finality that shook the very foundations of his soul. Show me how to make them pay. Kurama threw its head back and let out a roar. But it was not a roar of rage. It was a roar of triumph, a sound that promised ruin and retribution. The red chakra surged forward, not as an attack, but as an invitation. It flowed through the bars of the gate, and enveloped Naruto. It did not burn. It felt like a coming home. He looked down at his stomach. The intricate black lines of the 8 trigram seal began to glow with a malevolent orange light. The spiral at the center, the lock on the cage, began to spin. It didn't break. It didn't weaken. It changed. The lines twisted and reformed, the simple spiral morphing into a new, more complex and sinister pattern. It was still a seal, but it was no longer just a lock. It was a conduit, a gateway, a perfect fusion of Uzumaki Fuinjutsu and the Biju's raw power. A symbol of their new, terrible pact. The mindscape dissolved. Naruto's eyes snapped open. He was back in the forest, lying in the mud, the rain still falling on his face. The physical pain was still there, the ache in his bones, the fire in his thigh, the gnawing hunger in his belly. But it was distant now, unimportant. A profound change had taken root in his soul. The frantic, desperate fear was gone, replaced by a chilling clarity. The explosive, uncontrolled rage had been banked, cooled, and forged into something far more dangerous, a cold, patient, and razor-sharp resolve. He pushed himself to his feet, his movements no longer weary but deliberate. He stood for a moment, letting the rain wash the mud from his face, his eyes scanning the dark, imposing woods. It was no longer a green hell. It was a sanctuary. It was a classroom. It was a crucible. He had a purpose now. He had a teacher. And he had a promise to keep. A new one. The lonely, loud-mouthed boy named Naruto Uzumaki died that day in the mud and the rain. He was a ghost, a memory that would fade with time, whispered only in cautionary tales. The world would forget him, and in the shadows, something new would be born. For years passed. 4 years of silence. 4 years of training in the darkest corners of the world, far from the eyes of the 5 great nations. 4 years of honing his body, his mind, and his hatred into a perfect weapon. The name Naruto Uzumaki vanished, relegated to the bingo book's file of assumed dead rogue ninja. But in the underworld, among mercenaries, spies, and missing nin, a new whisper began to circulate. A whisper of a phantom, an untraceable saboteur who moved like the wind and struck with the fury of a demon. A ghost who wore a fox mask and left only destruction and carefully sown chaos in his wake. They called him Kitsune. And he was coming home. The wind was a sculptor of stone and patience. For centuries it had howled through the desolate mountain ranges that formed the jagged spine between the land of wind and the land of rivers, carving the sandstone into grotesque hoodoos and razor-thin fins. It was a land forgotten by cartographers and forsaken by all but the hardiest scorpions. It was, for this reason, the perfect place to disappear. Deep within a labyrinthine cave system, shielded from the scouring winds, a single light flickered. It was not the warm, wavering light of a torch, but the cold, steady glow of a fuinjutsu array etched into the rock. The intricate spiral of ink pulsed with a low hum, casting a sterile white light across a chamber that was more workshop than home. The walls were rough-hewn, lined with shelves bearing neatly organized scrolls, jars of custom-mixed ink, and bundles of rare herbs. A simple, hard-looking bedroll was tucked into one corner, and a low table dominated the center of the room. Spread across it was not a meal, but a detailed topographical map of the northern Fire Country, marked with symbols only one person could decipher. Standing before a section of smooth wall was the room's sole occupant. He was 17, but the boyishness of his youth had been sandblasted away, leaving behind the hard lines and sharp angles of a seasoned weapon. He was tall now, having shed the last of his adolescent stockiness for a lean, whipcord frame built for speed and lethality. His blonde hair, once a spiky, untamable mop, now fell to his shoulders, the sun-bleached strands held back from his face by a simple leather tie. He wore no orange. His attire was the color of shadows and dried blood, dark gray cargo pants, a form-fitting black long-sleeved shirt, and a light, sleeveless flak vest of a dull crimson, reinforced with lightweight ceramic plates. On his arms, visible below the rolled-up sleeves, were swirling black tattoos. They were not for decoration. They were fuinjutsu, complex ceiling arrays woven directly into his skin. His face was the most profound change. The open, earnest expression was gone, replaced by a mask of cold neutrality. The wide, brilliantly blue eyes that had once shone with endless optimism were now chips of winter sky, narrowed in intense concentration. They held a chilling intelligence, constantly observing, analyzing, and calculating. The 6 whisker marks on his cheeks remained, but they seemed less like a charming quirk and more like the feral markings of a predator. This was Naruto Uzumaki. Or rather, what was left of him. In his hand he held a specialized chakra-infused stylus. With movements that were impossibly steady and precise, he was adding the final stroke to a complex seal drawn on a blank scroll. It was a barrier disruption formula, designed to destabilize and collapse enemy ninjutsu barriers by overloading their foundational keynotes. It was a concept so advanced that most seal masters in the major villages would have deemed it theoretical at best. For him, it was Tuesday. He finished the final line, and the ink flared with a soft blue light before settling. He rolled the scroll with practiced efficiency and placed it in a pouch on his belt. Mission complete. The payment, a hefty sum of untraceable ryo and a cache of rare poisons from a minor daimyo, was already secured. Another piece of kindling for the fire. A voice rumbled in the quiet of his mind. It was a sound he was now as familiar with as his own heartbeat. The voice of Kurama. That lordling will use your work to ambush his neighbor, seize his lands, and the cycle of human greed will continue. You are becoming quite the proficient war profiteer, Kit. Naruto didn't reply out loud. His communication with Kurama had long ago evolved beyond the need for spoken words. He paid the price I asked, Naruto thought, his mental voice as cool and flat as the stone around him. What he does with the tool is his concern. His conflict keeps Suna's and Konoha's attention focused elsewhere. It serves our purpose. Pragmatic, Kurama noted, a hint of what could almost be described as pride in his tone. You have learned. Learned was an understatement. The past 4 years had not been a period of growth. They had been a complete deconstruction and rebuilding. He walked over to a training area carved deeper into the cave, where a massive, perfectly spherical boulder sat in the center. He held up a single hand, his fingers straight and pressed together like a blade. A low hum filled the air as blue-green chakra, visible to the naked eye, coalesced around his hand. It sharpened, compressed, and elongated into a nearly invisible blade of pure wind, about a foot long, that vibrated with contained power. There had been no hand seals, no shouted jutsu name, just will and mastery. He took a step forward, and in a movement too fast to follow, his hand swept forward. There was no sound of impact, only a faint, high-pitched shing. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a perfectly clean line appeared across the boulder's equator. The top half slid off with a soft, grinding sound and crashed to the floor, splitting into rubble. The cut surface was as smooth as polished glass. His mind drifted back, the feel of the wind chakra a key unlocking a painful memory. The memory was 4 years old. He was 13, scrawnier, and bleeding. He was in a desolate wasteland in the land of wind, a place Kurama had guided him to, where sandstorms could rage for weeks, erasing any trail. He was trying to do the same thing, cut a rock, but his wind chakra was a blunt, clumsy instrument. It chipped the stone, sandblasting it, but it wouldn't cut. Pathetic! Kurama's roar echoed through his mindscape, which at the time was still a place of terror for him. The great fox loomed behind its bars, its rage a palpable force. You are trying to force it! Wind is not a hammer. It is a razor's edge. It is the subtle pressure that finds the weakness in the mountain and turns it into a canyon over millennia. You are trying to be the storm. You must become the edge of the wind itself. I don't know how. Naruto had screamed back, frustration and pain making tears stream down his face. His hands were raw from the effort. Because your academy teachers taught you chakra is a tool you hold. It is not. It is a part of you. You do not hold your blood, you command it to flow. You must feel the chakra in every cell, in every breath. Stop thinking of it as an external energy source and start thinking of it as an extension of your own soul. The lesson that followed was brutal. Kurama forced him into a meditative state, forcing Naruto's awareness deep inside his own body. He was made to follow the flow of his chakra through every pathway, to feel every flicker and eddy. It was excruciating, like becoming aware of every nerve ending in his body all at once. He learned to move his chakra not with hand seals, but with pure thought, a flex of mental muscle. He spent a month doing nothing but levitating a single leaf, learning its weight, its texture, its resistance to the air, all through a thread of chakra so fine it was invisible. He learned that hand seals were a crutch, a mnemonic device for those without the focus or the raw power to command chakra directly. They were a beginner's tool, and he was no longer a beginner. He was Kurama's apprentice. Back in the present, Naruto let the wind blade dissipate. The memory brought no emotional turmoil, only a cold reinforcement of the lesson. He flexed his fingers, feeling the faint thrum of chakra residing there, waiting for his command. He moved to another section of the cave, where a large basin of water sat. He stared into it, his face reflected on the still surface. He closed his eyes. He didn't need them to see. The world bloomed in his mind's eye, not as a visual picture, but as a three-dimensional map of energy. He could feel the faint chakra signature of a sand lizard skittering across the rock 200 meters above him. He could feel the subtle shift in the natural energy of the wind as a stronger gust approached the cave entrance. He could feel the cold, dormant energy in the fuinjutsu seals around him. His sensory perception, a fusion of his own latent Uzumaki talent and Kurama's Bija senses, was so advanced it bordered on precognition. He could fight blindfolded in a crowded room and know the exact position and intent of every person present. His focus narrowed, turning inward. He examined the swirling maelstrom of power in his gut, the nexus point of his own chakra and Kurama's. The seal his father had created was still there, but their pact had fundamentally altered it. It was no longer just a cage, it was a perfectly balanced conduit. He could draw on Kurama's power with a thought, taking exactly what he needed, no more, no less. There was no more leakage, no more explosive rage unless he willed it. He had taken the single greatest weakness of a Jinchuriki, the lack of control, and through 4 years of hellish training, had turned it into his greatest strength. He picked up a small, smooth stone and held it over the water. A sphere of violent, blue chakra swirled to life in the palm of his other hand, the Rasengan. It was perfect, stable, a testament to his mastery. Jiraiya's legacy, Kurama noted, the voice laced with disdain. A powerful, yet ultimately incomplete and brutish technique. A battering ram, a foundation, Naruto corrected, his focus unwavering. He began to feed a sliver of Kurama's chakra into the sphere. The Rasengan's pure blue was instantly corrupted. The orb darkened to a malevolent violet, shot through with veins of crimson. It no longer hummed with power, it hissed, like acid eating through metal. The air around it grew cold, and the very light from the Fuinjutsu array seemed to bend away from it, as if afraid. This was his own creation, the dark evolution of his master's legacy, the Shokubai Rasengan, the corrosive sphere. He dropped the small stone into the basin. Before it could even hit the bottom, he thrust his hand, holding the corrosive sphere, into the water. There was no explosion. No concussive blast. The sphere simply touched the surface, and the water it contacted dissolved. Not evaporated but unmade. The sphere pulsed once, and a wave of corrosive energy spread outwards. The small stone vanished, its matter broken down on a fundamental level. The water in the basin hissed and bubbled, turning into a foul-smelling, toxic sludge. In seconds, the entire basin was empty, the stone at the bottom pitted and blackened as if it had aged 1,000 years in an instant. He withdrew his hand, the sphere vanishing. This was the power he now wielded. Not the power to destroy, but the power to unmake. It was a terrifying, absolute power that left no trace but a lingering aura of wrongness. He remembered the first time he'd used it. It had been on a creature, not an inanimate object. A giant, mutated bear that had stumbled upon his training ground. The Rasengan hadn't just killed it. It had erased a portion of its torso from existence, leaving a horrifyingly clean wound that defied all laws of biology. He had been sick for 3 days after. Good, Kurama had said, sensing his revulsion. That sickness is your sentimentality dying. To wield true power, you must be prepared to witness its consequences. You must understand that to your enemies, you are not a person. You are an obstacle. This jutsu will make you an obstacle they cannot comprehend. Now, he felt nothing but cold satisfaction. It was a tool. A brutally effective one. He spent the next few hours meticulously cleaning his gear, cataloging the new poisons, and updating his intelligence map with the information he'd gleaned from his last mission. His life was a routine of discipline and preparation. The loud, impulsive boy was a fossil buried under layers of harsh reality. In his place was a creature of singular, obsessive purpose. In the underworld, this creature had a name. He was a myth, a ghost story told by mercenaries in hushed tones. They called him Kitsune. No one knew his real name or his face. His clients were always anonymous, his instructions left in elaborate dead drops. His fees were exorbitant, but he delivered results that were considered impossible. They said he had destabilized the government of the Land of Noodles by exposing the daimyo's corruption without ever setting foot in the capital. They said he had stolen the secret formula for Iwagakure's new explosive clay right out from under the Tsuchikage's nose, leaving behind a perfectly forged, but inert, replica. They said he could walk through the most sophisticated barrier seals as if they were mist. He specialized in sabotage, espionage, and political destabilization. He never took simple assassination jobs. They were too crude, too loud. His art was to identify the pillars holding up an organization and to rot them from within, causing the entire structure to collapse on its own. He was a phantom, an agent of chaos, and the most effective mercenary on the continent. He was just finishing his work when it happened. A subtle, almost imperceptible flicker in the Fuinjutsu array that guarded the cave entrance. It wasn't an attack. It was a signal. A prearranged pattern. A client had a message. He moved silently, his footsteps making no sound on the stone floor. He slipped on his crimson vest and pulled up a black cloth mask that covered the lower half of his face. Finally, he picked up his own ANBU-style mask from the table. It was smooth, white porcelain, but its features were painted in sharp, blood-red lines. It was the face of a snarling fox, its eyes narrowed in a permanent, malevolent glare. He placed the mask over his face. The world seen through its narrow eye slits seemed to dim, to lose its color. In that moment, the last vestiges of Naruto Uzumaki vanished, locked away behind the porcelain. Now, there was only Kitsune. He navigated the dark, twisting tunnels with an eerie grace, his sensory abilities painting a perfect map of the path in his mind. He emerged into the biting wind of the mountainside through a fissure so narrow a normal person would have missed it. The dead drop was a hollowed-out rock a kilometer away, a location that changed with every client. Inside the hollow, there was a single, unmarked black scroll. He took it, leaving nothing behind, and retreated back to the sanctuary of his cave. Back in the main chamber, he unrolled the scroll. It was written in a complex cipher, one he himself had designed and sold to this particular anonymous contact broker. His eyes scanned the characters, his mind effortlessly decrypting the message. The request was simple and direct. Client anonymous. High priority. Target: the Fire River Trade Confederation. Specifically, the primary merchant convoy route between Konoha and the port city of Tanzakagai in the Land of River. Objective: total economic disruption. All goods are to be destroyed. The convoy guards, primarily Konoha shinobi, are to be incapacitated, not stolen from. No survivors to report tactical details, but the message of destruction must be absolute. Proof of complete obliteration is required for payment. Payment: triple the standard rate. Details upon confirmation. He read the message 3 times, his posture utterly still. His fingers traced the words Konoha and incapacitated. This wasn't a random job. It wasn't a squabble between petty lords or a rival village's espionage. This was a direct, calculated strike against the economic interests of the village hidden in the leaves. A slow, cold feeling spread through his chest. It wasn't excitement. It was the feeling of a key finally sliding into a lock. For 4 years, he had been circling his true target, gathering strength, building a reputation, acquiring resources. He had told himself it was about being ready, about waiting for the perfect moment. But a part of him knew he had also been hesitating, postponing the moment he would finally have to turn his eyes back towards the home that had cast him out. Now, the moment had come to him, gift-wrapped and paid for. So it begins. Kurama's voice rumbled, a deep, resonant hum of anticipation. A direct invitation. The first stone has been offered by an unknown hand. It would be rude not to throw it. Naruto walked back to the table and stared down at the map of the Fire Country. His eyes, hidden behind the mask's demonic glare, found Konoha. A place that now felt more like a concept than a memory. He could still remember the layout of every street, the smell of the ramen stand, the feel of the sun on the top of the Hokage monument. These memories were no longer warm. They were data points. Weaknesses. Infiltration routes. He took a red pin from a small box on the table and pressed it firmly into the map, marking the trade route described in the scroll. It was a major artery, pumping wealth and influence from the coast directly into Konoha's heart. It supplied the village with exotic goods, foreign currency, and most importantly, political leverage over the smaller nations it traded with. To sever this artery would be a significant blow. It wouldn't cripple the village, not yet, but it would make it bleed. It would be a statement. He stood there for a long time, the silence of the cave broken only by the low hum of the Fuinjutsu light. He was thinking of the faces he would encounter. Chunin, maybe a few jonin, guarding a convoy, people who might have known him. People who had celebrated his return from the Wave mission and then whispered, "Demon," after the Sasuke incident. He felt a flicker of something. Hesitation? Pity? Do you remember the look in the Uchiha's eyes in the hospital? Kurama's voice cut through the nascent sentiment like a shard of ice. The pride? He took your victory, your pain, your sacrifice, and wore it as a badge of honor. Do you remember the faces of the council? They would have had your head on a spike if they could. These guards are the arms and legs of that body. They uphold the system that condemned you. Pity for the soldier is a betrayal of your war against the general. Naruto's hands clenched into fists. The flicker of weakness was extinguished, replaced by the familiar, cold fire of his resolve. Kurama was right. There were pieces on a board, and he was about to overturn the table. He unrolled a fresh scroll and began to write his reply in the same complex cipher. Confirmation accepted. Time frame, 2 weeks. Kitsune. He sealed the scroll and prepared to head back to the dead drop. But before he left, he walked back to the large map on the wall. He stood before it, a phantom in a fox mask, a ghost of a boy who had once dreamed of having his face carved on the mountain overlooking that village. His revenge would not be a single, fiery act of destruction. A bijou bomb on the Hokage Tower would be too simple, too quick. It would make him a monster, yes, but a mindless one. It would prove Danzo right. No, his vengeance would be a work of art. A slow, meticulous, and agonizing deconstruction. Konoha's strength was not just its shinobi. It was the will of fire, the philosophy of unbreakable bonds and loyalty that inspired its people. It was its economic prosperity, which gave it influence. It was its political standing, its reputation as the strongest of the hidden villages. He would pull it all down, pillar by pillar. He would use their own systems against them. He would sow paranoia, expose their lies, and bankrupt their coffers. He would turn friend against friend, ally against ally. He would force them to confront the darkness they had chosen to ignore, the rot they had allowed to fester in the shadows. He would make the will of fire consume itself, until nothing was left but ashes and the bitter taste of truth. This mission was the first step. The first pillar. He reached out, his gloved finger tracing the road leading away from Konoha on the map. He spoke aloud, his voice raspy from disuse, a cold, unfamiliar sound in the silent cave. The first pillar to fall will be your prosperity. The Konoha that had risen from the ashes of Pain's assault and the turmoil of the Fourth Great Ninja War was a testament to the village's resilience. For years after the last ghost of that conflict had been laid to rest, the village was not just rebuilt, it was thriving. New shops lined the bustling streets, their vibrant banners fluttering in the afternoon breeze. The laughter of children from the rebuilt academy echoed through the air, a sound of profound peace. The will of fire, it seemed, had been forged anew in the crucible of loss, emerging stronger and brighter than ever. At the heart of this golden age, whether he acknowledged it or not, was Sasuke Uchiha. He stood in the center of Training Ground 7, a place haunted by the ghosts of his own past. The setting sun cast long shadows, painting the memorial stone in shades of orange and purple. Before him stood 3 nervous genin, the new generation of Team 7, their faces a mixture of awe and terror. Sasuke had changed. At 21, he was the living image of a clan reborn. His hair was a little longer, often tied back loosely, and he had foregone the high-collared Uchiha shirts of his youth for the standard dark blue attire and flak jacket of a Konoha jonin. But the true change was in his demeanor. The seething, vengeful anger had been banked, cooled by years of atonement missions and the suffocating embrace of a village desperate for a hero. He moved with a liquid grace, an economy of motion that spoke of absolute confidence in his terrifying power. He was a symbol of Konoha's ability to forgive, to reclaim its own, a prodigal son returned to the fold. Again, he said, his voice low and even, yet carrying an authority that made the 3 genin flinch. The largest of the 3, a boy from the Akimichi clan, charged forward. Sasuke didn't move until the last possible second. Then, with a flicker of motion, he stepped inside the boy's guard, his hand gently tapping the genin's neck. The boy froze, his eyes wide. "You are telegraphing your intent," Sasuke stated, not unkindly. "Your charge is a straight line. Your chakra flares a half-second before you move. A true opponent would have 3 kunai in your back before you took your second step. Control, Kenji. Power without control is just noise." He was a good teacher. Patient, precise, demanding. It was a role he had accepted with the same stoic reluctance he accepted everything else, but he excelled at it. He was molding the next generation in his image, efficient, deadly, and emotionally contained. From the edge of the training ground, Sakura Haruno watched, a fond smile on her face. She too was transformed. Her pink hair was cut shorter, a more practical style for her work. She wore the formal uniform of the Konoha Medical Corps, a testament to her position as the head of its shinobi surgical division. She was no longer the girl chasing a boy, but a woman standing beside a man she respected, their bond forged not in childish romance, but in shared trauma and a rebuilt future. "He's harsh, but he's effective," she said as Kakashi Hatake appeared beside her, leaning against a tree with his signature laziness, his one visible eye curved in a smile. "He's teaching them not to make his mistakes," Kakashi replied, his voice a low rumble. "Or perhaps, how to make them more effectively." The comment held a trace of melancholy that never quite left the former Hokage. The genin, exhausted and humbled, were finally dismissed. Sasuke walked towards Sakura and Kakashi, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "They are improving," he noted, his gaze lingering on the memorial stone for a moment before flicking away. "They idolize you, Sasuke-kun," Sakura said softly. "They all want to be the next hero of the leaf." Sasuke's lip curled slightly, a fleeting hint of his old arrogance. "There are worse things to aspire to." One of the genin, a bright-eyed girl with a shock of brown hair, lingered behind, looking hesitant. Uchiha-sensei? Sasuke turned, his expression impassive. Yes, Hana, is it true what they say? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. About your old teammate? The one who betrayed the village? The air grew still. The name went unspoken, a taboo that still hung over their generation. Kakashi straightened from the tree. Sakura's smile tightened. Sasuke looked down at the young girl, his onyx eyes unreadable. He was not a traitor, he said, the words carefully chosen, the official, sanitized version of the story. He was a boy who lost control of a power he couldn't handle. A tragic figure. A reminder that power without discipline leads only to destruction. He placed a hand on her head, a rare gesture of paternalism. That is the lesson. Do not forget it. The girl nodded, her eyes wide with the gravity of his words, and scurried off to join her teammates. Sasuke watched her go, his jaw tight. They still whisper about him, he muttered, more to himself than to the others. A failure from 4 years ago. He was your friend, Sasuke, Kakashi said quietly. He was a liability, Sasuke countered, his voice sharp and cold. A dobe who couldn't see the world for what it was. I tried to sever our bond to protect him. He responded with the fist of a demon. The village made the right choice. Sakura placed a comforting hand on his arm, her touch a silent agreement. In their minds, in the carefully constructed narrative of their lives, Naruto's exile was a sad but necessary event. He was a tragic footnote in the grand, heroic tale of Sasuke Uchiha's redemption. It was a lie they had all agreed to live, a foundation of their new, peaceful world. And like all foundations built on lies, it was dangerously brittle. Far from the sanitized memories of Training Ground 7, in the Jonin commander's office, the truth was a far messier affair. The room was a controlled chaos of maps, mission scrolls, and intelligence reports. In the center of it all, a shogi board sat with a game in mid-play, the pieces arranged in a complex, aggressive formation. Shikamaru Nara, now a Jonin commander himself, stared at the board, his fingers steepled under his chin. At 21, the lazy genius had been sharpened by responsibility. His hair was still tied in its signature ponytail, but his face had lost its youthful roundness, replaced by the sharp, intelligent features of his father. The shadows under his eyes were a permanent fixture. Another move, son? Shikaka Nara asked. He hadn't changed much, save for a few more gray hairs at his temples. He had officially retired as Jonin commander, passing the mantle to his son, but he still served as a senior advisor, his mind too valuable to be put out to pasture. Shikamaru moved a silver general, creating a new line of attack. Check. He leaned back, the springs of his chair groaning in protest. Troublesome. We've had 12 consecutive quarters of economic growth. The daimyo is pleased, the merchants are rich, and the missions are low-risk escorts and diplomatic assignments. It's too quiet. You find peace troublesome? Shikaku chuckled. I find it suspicious. Shikamaru countered, his gaze distant. Peace makes people complacent. It makes them forget what it's built on. He looked at his father, his expression serious. We've had 4 years of it. Exactly 4 years since he left. Shikaku's smile faded. The unspoken name hung between them as it had with Team 7, but here, it held a different weight, not of shame or failure, but of a puzzle piece that had been violently removed from the board, leaving a hole that nothing could quite fill. The village archives list him as Kia, Shikaku said carefully. His body was never recovered after his reported conflict with Iwane near the border. The village archives are full of convenient fictions, Shikamaru retorted, his voice low. I wrote the initial report. The tracker Nin who survived the encounter with Naruto, his testimony was inconsistent. He was terrified. He spoke of 2 chakra tales, of a power that wasn't just rage, but was controlled. The official story is that he was overwhelmed by an Iwa patrol. I never believed it. A cornered Naruto with the Kyuubi's power unleashed? He wouldn't be overwhelmed. He would vanish. He's too stubborn to die so easily. Shikaku sighed, knowing his son's mind was like a dog with a bone. And what would be the point of this line of thinking, Shikamaru? He is gone. The village has moved on. We have stability. We have the illusion of stability, Shikamaru corrected. It's a house of cards built on the back of a scapegoat. One good gust of wind. He trailed off, looking back at the shogi board. It's a drag, but I just have a bad feeling. Something's coming. His words were more prophetic than he could have possibly imagined. The first gust of wind arrived not as a whisper, but as a scream. It came in the form of a lone, half-dead Chunin, the sole survivor of a merchant convoy guard unit, who collapsed just inside the main gates of Konoha. When he was brought to the hospital, Sakura was the one to oversee his treatment. The man was delirious, his body covered in strange, weeping sores. They weren't burns, and they weren't cuts. The flesh seemed to be dissolving, eaten away by a chakra so foul and corrosive that it actively fought against her medical ninjutsu. Her hands would glow with green light, the flesh would begin to mend, and then a flicker of blackish-red energy would flare up, and the healing would reverse, the wound reopening with a sickening sizzle. What is this? A younger medic asked, her face pale. I've never seen anything like it. It's like anti-medical jutsu, Sakura murmured, her brow furrowed in a mixture of scientific curiosity and deep frustration. She had faced every kind of injury imaginable during the war, but this was new. It felt personal, like a direct challenge to her skills. It's not just damaging the cells, it's unmaking them. Get me a sample for the lab. Full isolation protocols. The Chunin's physical state was alarming, but his story, pieced together from feverish ramblings, was what sent a chill down the spine of the ANBU captain taking his report. The convoy had been massive. 30 wagons laden with raw silk from the west, refined steel from the north, and exotic spices from the south. A veritable river of wealth flowing towards Konoha. They were deep in the forested highlands of the Fire Country, a notoriously safe route. The attack had come without warning. There was no ambush, no battle cry. Just a presence. One moment the birds were singing, the next a suffocating silence fell over the forest. The guards, a full platoon of 20 Chunin, had drawn their weapons, forming a defensive circle. Then, the chaos began. It wasn't a fight. It was a harvest. The man babbled about a wind that cut through steel cart axles like butter. He spoke of guards being incapacitated not by blades, but by precise, brutal strikes from a phantom who moved too fast to see. They weren't killed. Their limbs were broken, their chakra points sealed with a terrifying precision, leaving them conscious but paralyzed. And the cargo was simply annihilated. Crates of silk were shredded into worthless floss. Ingots of steel were sliced into confetti. Barrels of priceless spices were ruptured and their contents scattered into the mud, rendered unsalvageable. It was an act of pure, unadulterated destruction, with no motive of theft. The Chunin had only survived because he had been knocked unconscious early in the attack and had fallen under a wagon, hidden from view. When he awoke, hours later, he was alone in a scene of absolute devastation, his comrades groaning in agony, and a single, chilling symbol painted in mud on the side of a ruined wagon, a stylized, snarling fox head. The report landed on Tsunade's desk like a lead weight. The fifth Hokage, her face etched with a familiar weariness, read it 3 times. The years had not been entirely kind to her. While she retained her youthful appearance, the strain of leadership, especially in the political hornet's nest that was post-war Konoha, showed in the depths of her brown eyes. The civilian council, emboldened by Danzo's martyrdom, the official story was that he died defending the village from the rampaging Naruto, had clawed back much of the power she had wrested from them. The elders, Hamura and Koharu, were a constant, nagging presence, second-guessing her every move, always reminding her of her greatest failure, the loss of the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. She slammed the report down on her desk. Sabotage. This is professional, high-level sabotage. Shikaku and Shikamaru stood before her, their expressions grim. The target was purely economic, Shikamaru said, pointing to a map of the Fire Country. They didn't steal a single ryo. They destroyed the goods, paralyzed the guards, and left one survivor to tell the tale. This wasn't a raid. It was a message. And what message is that? Tsunade demanded, her knuckles white. Konoha's trade routes are vulnerable. Worse, Shikamaru replied, his sharp eyes narrowed. It's a message to our trading partners. Doing business with Konoha is a risk. This attacker knew exactly which convoy to hit. The Fire River Confederation is our most lucrative partner. This will spook them. If the attacks continue, the entire Confederation could collapse, costing us billions in revenue and influence. Who? Tsunade growled. IWA? They're still bitter about the last treaty. Kumo? They've always been opportunistic. Shikamaru shook his head. This is too subtle for IWA, too wasteful for Kumo. Their style is smash and grab. This is surgical. The perpetrator used wind-style jutsu of a level we haven't seen since Danzo's top operatives. They incapacitated 20 Chunin single-handedly without taking a single life. And then there's this corrosive chakra Sakura is reporting. It's an unknown variable. He paused, tapping a finger on the desk. And the symbol left behind. A fox. It's almost theatrical. Before Tsunade could reply, her office door opened without a knock. Elders Hamura and Kohara entered, their faces twin masks of stern disapproval. Tsunade, Kohara began, her voice thin and reedy. We have read the preliminary report. A catastrophic failure of security on our most vital trade route, an attack by a highly skilled unknown entity. Tsunade corrected through gritted teeth. We are handling it, as you handled the Jinchuriki situation 4 years ago? Hamura shot back, his words a poisoned dart. You allowed an unstable weapon to run rampant, resulting in the death of a patriot like Danzo Shimura and the loss of the Nine Tails. Your sentimentality has always been your greatest weakness. Now, our economy is under attack. The council is demanding action. Tsunade's temper flared. And what would you have me do? Declare war on an enemy we haven't even identified? I need intelligence, not your ceaseless criticism. You need results? Kohara said coldly. This reeks of an outside power trying to destabilize us. Send a full battalion. Secure the routes. Show strength, and leave the village's northern border exposed? Shikamaru interjected, his voice calm but firm. A battalion is a blunt instrument. We'd be swatting at a fly with a sledgehammer. The attacker is a single entity, maybe a small team. They're fast, precise, and smart. They want us to overreact, to stretch our forces thin. We need a scalpel, not an axe. Tsunade looked at Shikamaru, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. He was right. The elders were pushing for a response that was both politically popular and strategically idiotic. Shikamaru is correct, she declared, her voice regaining its command. I will dispatch a small, elite team. A hunter-killer unit. Their objective is to identify the perpetrator and, if possible, neutralize them. Hamura sniffed disdainfully. And who will you entrust with this vital task? Another team of reckless genin? Tsunade's gaze hardened. I am sending Jonin. Kakashi Hatake will lead. His experience is unmatched. Sakura Haruna will accompany him. We need our best medic to analyze this corrosive chakra on site, and... She paused, a bitter taste in her mouth. She needed someone with tracking skills and an expendable political profile. Sai. His sensory abilities and his time en route give him a unique perspective on this kind of Black Ops mission. The elders exchanged a look. The inclusion of Sai, a former root member now integrated into the regular forces, was a concession to their faction. It placated them for now. They gave a curt, unified nod and swept out of the office. Their point made, Tsunade sank back into her chair, the weight of her hat feeling heavier than ever. A team of ghosts, she murmured. Kakashi, haunted by his past. Sakura, haunted by hers. And Sai, a ghost of Danzo's making, all sent to hunt a phantom. Shikamaru rolled out a fresh map. The attacker hit this convoy here, he said, marking a spot. The next convoy of this value is due to leave Tanzakagai in 3 days. The most logical point of ambush along its route would be here. He circled a location. The Great Konoha Bridge over the Yoshino River. It's a natural choke point. Isolated, difficult to bypass. If I were him, that's where I would strike next. Tsunade looked at the map, then at the young commander. Get the dispatch ready. Tell Kakashi they leave within the hour. Tell them to expect a fight. And tell them, failure is not an option. The wind whipped through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Team Kakashi moved in silence, a well-oiled machine of 3. They were ghosts, just as Tsunade had said. Kakashi, his silver hair stark against the green canopy, led the way. He felt a familiar sense of disquiet, a premonition that had saved his life more times than he could count. This mission felt wrong. The details were too clean, the motive too murky. It felt less like a foreign attack and more like something personal. The mention of high-level wind jutsu and a fox emblem stirred a memory he had long tried to bury. Behind him, Sakura moved with the quiet confidence of a seasoned jonin. She was focused, her mind occupied with the puzzle of the corrosive chakra, but beneath the layers of professionalism, a nervous energy thrummed. She hated this part of the country. It was too close to the Valley of the End, too close to memories she had spent 4 years reshaping into something palatable. And then there was Sai. He moved with a disconcerting grace, a faint, artificial smile on his lips. He was the wild card, utterly loyal to the new Konoha on the surface, but his core programming was still Danzo's. He observed everything, his black eyes missing no detail. The target seems to enjoy psychological warfare, Sai commented, his voice disrupting the silence. The destruction of property over theft suggests a desire to inspire terror, not to gain wealth. An artist, in his own way. He's a saboteur, Sai, not an artist, Sakura corrected, her tone sharp. The two are not mutually exclusive, Sai replied, his smile never wavering. They reached the vantage point Shikamaru had designated late in the afternoon of the second day. The Great Konoha Bridge was an impressive structure of wood and stone, spanning a deep, fast-moving gorge. It was, as Shikamaru had predicted, the perfect ambush point. We're early, Kakashi stated, his eyes scanning the entire area. The convoy isn't due for another day. We'll set up a perimeter and lie in wait. Sakura, prepare your medical station. Sai, I want ink sentinels in a 2-kilometer radius. Alert us to anything that moves, man or beast. They worked with quiet efficiency, melting into the landscape. Kakashi took the highest point, a perch in a tall cedar tree that gave him a perfect view of the entire bridge. Sakura established a hidden triage area in a small alcove in the cliff face. Sai's inked birds and mice scurried off into the forest, a silent, sprawling network of spies. Hours passed. The sun set, painting the sky in fiery colors that slowly faded to a deep, stardusted indigo. The full moon rose, bathing the bridge in a pale, ethereal light. The only sounds were the rush of the river below and the whisper of the wind. It was just after midnight when Sai's voice came through their earpieces, startlingly calm. Kakashi-senpai. I have a contact. Hostile? Kakashi asked, his body instantly tensing. Negative, Sai replied, a hint of confusion in his voice. It's a single individual. Approaching the bridge from the west. On foot. No weapon drawn. His pace is casual, Kakashi's eye narrowed. Maintain observation. All units hold positions. Do not engage until I give the signal. He focused his gaze on the western end of the bridge. A figure emerged from the shadows of the forest. It was a lone man, tall and lean. He walked with a relaxed, almost lazy gait, his hands in his pockets. He wasn't dressed like a shinobi. He wore dark, practical gear, and his movements were utterly silent. He stopped in the exact center of the bridge, directly under the moonlight, as if he were waiting for an audience. He stood there for a full minute, looking down at the rushing water below. He seemed to be enjoying the view. This is our attacker? Sakura whispered over the comm. He's just standing there. It's a trap, Kakashi stated. He knows we're here. He's drawing us out. As if hearing him, the figure on the bridge slowly turned his head, his gaze sweeping across the dark forest where they were hidden. He raised a hand and slowly, deliberately, affixed a mask to his face. It was white porcelain, catching the moonlight like bleached bone. It was the snarling, stylized face of a fox. That's him, Kakashi said, his voice grim. The fox symbol. All units, prepare to engage on my mark. He studied the figure. The man's posture was relaxed, but it was the relaxation of a predator, coiled and ready. This was no ordinary ninja. This was someone operating on a level of confidence, or arrogance, that was deeply unsettling. Kakashi decided to seize the initiative. Identify yourself! He projected his voice, infusing it with chakra so it boomed across the gorge. You are trespassing on Fire Country territory under the jurisdiction of Konoha. State your name and your purpose. The figure on the bridge didn't speak. He simply tilted his head, the mask's painted snarl seeming to mock them. He slowly lowered his hands from his pockets, letting them hang loosely at his sides. The message was clear. The time for talking was over. The performance was about to begin. The silence that followed Kakashi's challenge was absolute. It was a weighted, predatory silence that seemed to drink the very sound from the air, the rush of the river, the rustle of the leaves, everything. The figure in the fox mask stood perfectly still in the center of the bridge, a pale specter under the moonlight, his posture an unnerving blend of casual indifference and coiled lethality. He was not an intruder caught in a trap. He was an actor on a stage, waiting for his co-stars to take their marks. He's baiting us. Sakura's voice crackled through the earpiece, taut with nervous energy. He knows our positions. Of course he does, Kakashi replied, his single eye narrowed to a slit. He was analyzing the man's stance, his breathing, the almost imperceptible way he distributed his weight. Every detail screamed danger. This wasn't a rogue chunin or a hired mercenary. This was an apex predator. His control is flawless. I can't get a proper read on his chakra levels. It's like he's perfectly contained. Sai, anything? My ink birds are getting nothing, senpai. Sai reported, his usually calm voice tinged with professional curiosity. It's as if he has no heat signature. No chakra leakage at all. He's a blank spot on my sensory map. I only see him because my eyes are telling me he is there. This revelation sent a fresh chill down Kakashi's spine. To have such mastery over one's own chakra as to be invisible to even advanced sensory techniques was the hallmark of a truly elite shinobi, on par with the Kage themselves. The figure, as if bored of the standoff, finally moved. He slowly raised one hand, holding it out, palm up. A small, almost imperceptible vortex of wind began to form above it, kicking up dust from the bridge's stone path. He's using a wind jutsu, Sakura noted. Without hand seals, Kakashi finished, his voice grim. The casual display of power was a deliberate provocation. A taunt. I will create an opening, Sai announced. His hands were already a blur over a scroll. With a flick of his wrist, four large ink lions, powerfully built and snarling silently, sprang to life. They bounded from the trees, landing on the bridge with soft thuds, immediately flanking the masked man. Ninpo, Chojugiga, the lions charged. The masked figure didn't even turn his head. He simply clenched the fist that was gathering the wind. The vortex imploded, and a compressed shockwave of air erupted outwards in a 360-degree radius. It was not a grand, destructive gale. It was a precise, invisible pulse of force. The ink lions dissolved mid-lunge, their forms disintegrating into splatters of black ink that were blasted off the sides of the bridge and into the gorge below. Sai let out a sharp gasp, felt more than heard over the comms. He didn't just destroy them, Sai said, a note of disbelief in his tone. He infused the air with a trace of that corrosive chakra. It broke down the chakra binding the ink together before the physical force even hit. My jutsu was unmade. The masked man slowly lowered his hand, once again standing in perfect stillness. The message was clear: your parlor tricks are useless against me. Kakashi knew they had lost the element of surprise and initiative. This couldn't be a battle of attrition. It had to be swift, decisive, and overwhelming. Sakura, on my mark, you will engage from the right flank. Your objective is to disrupt his footing and create a close-quarters engagement. Force him to focus on you. Kakashi commanded, his voice sharp and authoritative. Sai, provide support from the rear. Use long-range binding jutsu. Do not let him get a moment's peace. I will attack from the left. We strike together. Now, the coordinated assault was a thing of beauty. Kakashi was a silver blur, leaping from the treetops, his hand already crackling with the piercing shriek of the Chidori. The air filled with the sound of 1,000 birds as concentrated lightning chakra formed a blade around his fist. Simultaneously, Sakura burst from the foliage on the opposite side of the gorge. "Shinaro!" she roared, her fist, glowing with the pale green energy of her precise chakra control, slammed into the stone abutment of the bridge. The entire structure shuddered, and a web of cracks spread across the stone. A huge chunk of the bridge's foundation ripped free, hurtling towards the masked man, designed not to crush him, but to force him to move into their pre-planned kill zone. From behind, Sai's brush flew across his scroll. "Ninpo, Chojugiga!" This time, it wasn't lions, but two massive ink serpents that erupted from the scroll. They didn't attack directly but shot towards the man's legs, their bodies designed to ensnare and bind him. It was a perfectly executed three-pronged attack that would have overwhelmed any jonin. The masked man reacted with a calm that was utterly inhuman. As the massive boulder flew towards him, he didn't dodge. He simply raised a hand. An invisible blade of wind, impossibly sharp, shot from his fingertips. It struck the boulder, and with a faint hiss, the multi-ton projectile was bisected as cleanly as a fruit. The two halves flew harmlessly past him on either side, crashing into the gorge walls. At the same instant, he stomped his foot. Not a chakra-infused stomp like Sakura's, but a simple, hard impact. From the point of contact, a complex fuinjutsu array, etched in what looked like glowing blue chakra, spread across the surface of the bridge like a spider's web. Sai's ink serpents, the moment they touched the glowing lines, sizzled and dissolved into nothing, the chakra animating them completely neutralized. He had countered both Sakura's and Sai's attacks in the same fraction of a second, without moving more than a few feet, and then, he turned his full attention to Kakashi. The Chidori was inches from his chest. Kakashi's Sharingan eye, spinning with its 3 tomo, saw the attack landing. Victory was at hand, but the masked man didn't defend. He attacked. He moved with a blinding speed that even Kakashi's Sharingan had trouble tracking, his body flowing like water around the point of Kakashi's thrust. His left hand shot out, not to block, but to gently cup Kakashi's elbow. His right hand, formed into a knife hand, struck 2 precise points on Kakashi's side, a nerve cluster and a major tenketsu point. The effect was instantaneous. The lightning chakra of the Chidori sputtered and died. A wave of paralyzing numbness shot up Kakashi's arm, and his entire right side seized up. He gasped, his momentum carrying him past his target. He stumbled, catching himself before he fell, his right arm hanging limp and useless at his side. It had taken less than 5 seconds. Their perfectly coordinated assault had been dismantled with contemptuous ease. "What was that?" Sakura breathed, her eyes wide with shock as she landed on the bridge. She had never seen Kakashi's Chidori neutralized so effortlessly. The masked man didn't answer. He turned his attention to her, his head tilting slightly. "Cherry Blossom," he said, his voice a low, filtered baritone. It was the first time he had spoken, and the sound was chillingly familiar, like a distorted echo from a half-forgotten dream. He took a step towards her. "Still relying on brute strength. Your chakra control is impressive. A sledgehammer to crack a nut. But you have no finesse. Your movements are loud, your intentions obvious." Every word was a clinical, cutting analysis. He wasn't just fighting her, he was dissecting her skills, pointing out her flaws with the detached air of a disappointed teacher. Sakura, her pride stung, roared and charged. She threw a punch aimed at his head, a blow that could shatter solid rock. He didn't meet it. He flowed backwards, her fist passing harmlessly through the air where his head had been. He moved with her, staying just inside her reach, his feet seeming to glide over the stone. "Your taijutsu is built on the assumption of landing a single, decisive blow," he continued, his voice a calm monotone as he effortlessly evaded a second and third punch. "You leave yourself wide open with every swing. A fatal flaw." He proved his point. As Sakura swung with a powerful right hook, he ducked under it. In a motion of liquid grace, his legs swept out, not aiming for her feet, but for her knee. She tried to pull back, but he was too fast. The impact wasn't forceful, but it was perfectly placed. A jolt of agonizing pain shot up her leg, and her knee buckled. She cried out, stumbling to one knee. He stood over her, the moonlight glinting off his impassive mask. He didn't press the attack. He simply watched her, his silence more unnerving than any threat. From the trees, Sai sent a flurry of smaller, faster ink birds, each tipped with an explosive tag. They swarmed the masked man from all sides. A futile gesture, the man murmured. He moved again, becoming a blur of motion. He didn't dodge the birds, he moved through them, his hands a flurry of precise strikes. He tapped each bird with a single finger, a minuscule pulse of chakra disabling the explosive tags an instant before they could detonate. They fell to the bridge around him like dead leaves. Kakashi, his paralysis slowly receding, watched in stunned disbelief. The man's taijutsu was a terrifying fusion of the Uchiha's graceful efficiency and the Hyuga's precise targeting, yet it was something else entirely. It was fluid, adaptive, and utterly ruthless. His tactical awareness was on par with Inara's. His command of wind jutsu was masterful. Who was this man? Enough games? Kakashi growled, pushing himself to his feet. He knew he had only one option left. To end this,